Hey, babe.
Greetings!
How goes it?
Yep.
You ready for this Aeldari review?
Aeldari!
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
What? What have you got there?
What have you got there?
Well, I'm reading the Codex Aeldari, so I'm getting ready for this review.
But I have the Codex Aeldari.
No, I've got it right here.
Oh no.
Folks, welcome to this all-new faction focus on this beautiful tome, Codex Aeldari.
It's a chunky boy!
Yes, sent to us for preview by Games Workshop. Thank you very much. In this particular series, we are going to go over the top fives of the book. This video being the top 5 changes between this codex and the previous one. We're going to cover the army rules, we're going to cover the Craftworld Attributes, the Stratagems, the Relics, the statistics, and then finally the points. It will be a highlight of our...
Of some stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff.
It will be the highlights of, you know, the most extreme changes or the most relevant changes.
And speaking of which, if you do want all of the details, head over to the website because we have the tactical articles on there right now, and that goes into every aspect of the book in very, very fine detail. So if you want to really get into the meat and potatoes, that's where you
It's
go.
completely free. Go check out the website right now. But this should be the video for you if you want a good overview of the codex. So that's all coming up next. So what's up first on the agenda today? It is, of course, the army rules. And these are some big changes because they certainly haven't existed in this format in any Elder Codex ever, actually. And I've been playing since 2nd edition. So, you know, that's every single codex the Elder have ever had.
Yes.
But before we get into this, just to let you guys know, we've got 2 other videos accompanying this one. That's going to be the top 5 combinations, so those powerful combinations, and the top 5 units that we think are in these codexes. Top 5 units is out now on demand, and combinations will be hot on its heels next week. Finally, Harlequins are also in this book.
Yes.
It would be remiss to not give them, as are Ynnari, be remiss to not give them their own quick little speech. Harlequins we're going to do as a separate video entirely.
Indeed.
The Ynnari, maybe touch on them with the Harlequins.
Ynnari I'm going to talk about in this video because it's a big change to their previous incarnation.
Sure.
It actually makes them quite
Incarnation.
relevant. Oh, nice! That was terrible.
Yeah,
That was
that's
beautiful.
That was
That was,
terrible.
you've peaked.
Should we try again?
Yeah, right.
Elbows.
Better.
8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'll give it a 7. Anyway.
So with no further ado, let's now get into the army rules. So you've got leaders of the war hosts.
One autarch.
Yeah, 1 autarch.
Per detachment.
Fine.
There's a shocker, basically the same as every other codex.
Yeah, objective
far.
secured if you're troops. There are some ways to give other non-troops units objective secured, which is nice, but you've got your traditional troops are objective secured. We have traveling players.
Yeah, so you can take a, this is something that's been previewed on Warcom already at this point. You can take a Harlequins detachment in an army without breaking your main army rules. You still manage to get all of the Harlequin stuff apart from the Harlequin army rules, so it's basically full allies again, which is a thing.
It's an interesting one because obviously they have chosen to chuck the Harlequins into the Aeldari Codex. Although I will say the Harlequins do feel very full. They feel like they feel like their own army. It doesn't feel like, you know, a thin little supplement which has been put in as an afterthought. So if you are a Harlequin player, I would say don't worry.
Yeah, you should
wait for our video dedicated to them.
You shouldn't be worried. It's more along the lines of it's just a bit like we've moved away from allies and things like that, unless you're Eldar, and then you kind of can do it with Harlequins anyway. I don't know whether you will or not, but it's just it's a nice bonus if you're running if you were running a mixed army anyway. Right. I think there will be some ways to use them quite competitively, but I'm not 100% sure on that yet.
Yeah.
But it's there, and it's a nifty little rule if that's sort of the route that you're going down.
Yeah.
The big changes though.
Yeah, let's talk about the two big things.
Battle focus.
Yep.
And Strands of Fate.
Yep.
Battle focus is
Massively changed from what it was.
Yes, it has.
Well, it's similar.
It's similar,
because
but-
you still got the advance and shoot your assault and pistol weapons.
Yeah, but the move afterwards is all new.
That's the brand. Well, it's
Yeah.
it's a
It's
classic.
a nod from the Corsair
It's a classic.
rules, really, isn't it?
So essentially with that, once you've done your advance and shooting without penalty, it does specifically say you can only shoot with assault and pistol weapons.
that's right.
After you've done that, you're then able to move afterwards on the roll of a d6.
Yeah.
Yeah, not if you advance. Not if you advance.
No.
Oh, sorry, forgive me. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you've got an advance component to so that you basically you aren't taking penalties for your assault weapons, and you can also fire your pistols, which is nifty. And then you get to move d6 after you've shot, as long as you've not fallen back or advanced.
Yeah, it does specify after a shooting attack as well, so you can't do it if you haven't shot something. So that means that things like eligible targets are going to be required, which is an important factor because I think there was a bit of murkiness in previous editions where you could still like fire and fade, for example, if you hadn't shot.
Yeah, it was a bit...
That's all of that sort of ambiguity has been removed.
Yeah.
It's you have to shoot something, then you can move again with the d6 inches.
Yeah, it gives you a really nice opportunity, already a very quick army, to have even more movement and secure better ball control, jump onto objectives if you need to. One thing I do like they have specified is that if you're going into terrain, you -3 from that.
Yeah.
So you can only go up to 3 inches.
Yeah.
So if that wasn't there, that could have been very, very powerful to the point of it being a bit much.
It's almost like it was thought of that being behind a wall and then touching into the wall and then shooting and then moving back for an inch was really, really bad, and it was changed. So I will say no more. But there's a few other little caveats. You can't do it. You can't use it to re-embark, so you can't use it to jump inside a transport. You can't do it if you've arrived from reinforcements that turn. So there's a few little caveats, but it's still a very, very powerful rule to have.
It's a very, very powerful rule, but without it becoming, let's say obnoxious, because the jump, shoot, jump, but in behind terrain where you're interacting with your opponent, but they can't do anything back to you is really harsh. And it would be the same as if they were going into a transport too. That's battle focus. And there are ways, of course, to manipulate that role, particularly little stratagem. We can talk about that later on. But the Strands of Fate, all new.
Your pure army rule.
It feels a bit Adeptus Sororitas mechanic-esque, as in Miracle
Similar
Dice.
to Miracle Dice.
So who wants to take this one? Who's going to go over this one?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
So essentially, it's at the beginning of each battle round, isn't it?
Yeah, top of each battle round.
Yeah. You're able to take 66 and you throw them, which is what you normally do with dice.
Well
So
done.
that should be familiar to most players. So that's good. Depending on the type of battle you're playing, the battle size, you'll then be able to pick a certain amount of those dice. So if you're playing Strike Force, for example, you'll be able to take 4 of those dice. And then the dice that you roll will represent a certain thing that you can manipulate later on in the game. So as an example, between 1 and 6, if I picked 4 of those 6 dice and I had 2 2s and 2 5s, I'd be able to have 2 charge roll dice and 2 wound roll dice. And those dice you can then use during the game to become an unmodified roll of a 6, which is mega.
It's mega, and you can combine them, right? So let's say your example where you rolled 2 2s and you chose to pick them. You can actually use both of them on your charge roll. So effectively, you've got a guaranteed 12-inch charge.
Yep.
Which is massive for a multitude of reasons, right? Maybe you've got a deep striking unit coming out of Wraith Blades or something coming in reserved. There's no ambiguity. You're going to make that charge because you've got your Strands of Fate.
Yeah.
Very powerful mechanic.
So a 1 is for an advanced roll, a 2 is a charge roll, a 3 is for a psychic test, 4 for a hit roll, 5 for a wound roll, and 6 for a saving throw.
Yeah, which is super cheeky.
It's very good. And
super cheeky.
what you talked about before comparing to Miracle Dice, I think having used the Miracle Dice mechanic myself before, it definitely takes more brain power to use the Miracle Dice than this version as well. But because you're getting this from the beginning of battle round 1, and you've already got 4 dice if you're doing a 2,000 point strike force mission, you've already got way more things to change than a miracle dice, and they're always 6s.
Yeah, they're always 6s.
Yeah,
you do lose them at the start of each battle round, so any that you don't use are wasted.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting mechanic because there will be times where you kind of go, oh, none of these are really that useful. You'll be like, oh, I got a couple of frees, but all my psychers are dead. Or I got a couple of charge ones, but I don't want to be charging this turn. But then there's other times where it's going to spike really, really harshly, and you go, I got like 4 6s for saves on my avatar. And you go, cool.
It's unkillable.
What? Yeah, and you've only got 5 anti-tank weapons. Well, he's not dying. So there's going to be a really weird. There's not too many ways to manipulate it.
No, there are a couple of fairly significant ways. But it's Farseer for a reroll.
Yeah, Farseer for a reroll. There's a relic which allows you to
give you an extra dice. I think.
Yeah, I think you roll an extra dice. And there's the Warlord trait from Ulthwe, which allows you to keep an extra dice. Yeah. I think that's the way it works. So there's like 3 ways to manipulate it, and all are quite specific. But it's the sheer fact that there will be times where it's kind of doesn't help you that much, and there will be times where it can literally win you the game. Which is wild as a mechanic. I think personally you get too many dice.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen 3 at the absolute max.
It's one of those mechanics which can become oppressive because if you do roll that 666 and say you've got your avatar or a really key alpha unit which is going to win you the game if it can survive this battle round.
And you just go 666.
And you basically know at that point it cannot die. It's one of those situations where your opponent will then go, well, I literally can't do anything. And that makes it not fun. Because if they need to be able to have a chance. Having said that, that is that's an outlier case.
It is an outlier. It's
That's assuming the person's rolled 3 6s on that 66 roll in the first place. And it's one of the more extreme examples, but it can happen. It can happen. It is something to consider.
It is
it's a cool mechanic
It's such a cool mechanic. It's so thematic.
It's very fluffy.
It is like it's really, really fluffy. It is just one of those ones where I'm sort of looking at it going like, oh, it's really cool. It's really thematic. This is exactly the kind of rules I like to see. Just rein it in a little bit.
Maybe maybe even just 3d6 would be fine.
And then you just keep those 3d6.
And then maybe there was a relic which allowed you to do another one, or you'd have 4d6. But look, regardless, it is what it is. And in a meta right now where there's a lot of incredibly powerful armies with these new books, which also have a host of their own really powerful rules, it probably isn't that oppressive in comparison to those top tier armies. But if you're looking at some of the earlier codexes, I'm like, ooh, that's really nasty. Really nasty. So we're already seeing, that's the army rules. We're already seeing that they've got an incredible foundation with that army rule alone and battle focus, because anything which manipulates movement in Warhammer 40,000 is very, very powerful because it's about getting onto objectives, holding points, holding ground, right board control. And anything which manipulates your luck is also extremely powerful.
The reliability it gives you is huge and can't be underestimated.
So we're off to a very powerful start here. But are they as powerful as something like Drakari?
There is one more thing on here, which is the Favoured of Cain.
Oh yes,
we'll talk about that now.
We should talk about that.
Phoenix Lords, this is a very quick bit, I'll just mention very quickly. So for your Phoenix Lords now, essentially they all have a 4-up invulnerable save. They can never lose more than 3 wounds per phase, which is pretty tasty.
That's nice.
That's pretty nice.
Not
bad. They can't have a relic or a warlord trait, but you'll see later in the video that they do have their own selection of pseudo relics and Exarch powers.
Now, weirdly, Caleb Mencher Cain, or his avatar, isn't a favourite of Cain, as I recall.
No, but we'll touch on him.
We'll
talk about him. Don't worry. He can't be favoured of Cain. He is Cain.
He is Cain. Yeah. Anyway, that's the army rules. We already see we're off to a very powerful start. Let's get into the rest of it, see how it can start to compare with some of those other powerful books like Drakari. It's coming up next. It's time to talk attributes. We're not going to cover every Craftworld or every change, but we're going to talk about some of the ones which stand out to us. We have to give an honourable mention to Biel-Tan as well, because no, none of us are going to speak about Biel-Tan, but it is featured in the battle report, also available today if you're watching this on day of release.
And I'm sure we'll be using all of these attributes in at various points.
So you can see it there. But let's go over Ulthwe. Got a game coming out with Ulthwe on demand very, very soon. Ulthwe have always been my favorite craft world, just thematically. It's one of the first armies that I ever started collecting. And as it turns out, in my opinion, there's an argument that it's the best craft world. There's an argument. That's what from a rules perspective, there are outliers depending on how you build the army.
I think it's like that with a lot of these sorts of chapter tactics type things, especially now that you can only run one per army.
Yep. Yeah. It's just the Ulthwe are the one that...
They're a good generalist.
They get... But they also get more abilities.
Okay, I'm going to point this out now. Why do they have 4 abilities?
That's the thing. They are getting more rules.
Some of them are quite niche, though.
They are, but still very good to have in a competitive setting where you don't know what you're going to face on an all-comers list. So let's go over it. The attributes: Foresight of the Damned. Right, I basically get like an Obsidian Rose-esque reroll, a reroll of a wound for each unit.
Which is already incredible.
That's an incredibly powerful asset. Biltan, incidentally, has a reroll to hit, which is also really powerful.
Yeah.
So it's like Blackheart versus Obsidian Rose.
It's a running theme.
Yeah, it's a running theme. So we've got a single reroll, wound roll, and that is basically on every unit in your army. Next, each time you make a psychic test for a psychic unit with this attribute, if it's the first psychic test you take, add 1 to the roll. As you will see that when we go over the psychic powers, having a bonus inbuilt is more important than ever because it will actually help get ranges on certain powers, which we'll discuss later. But adding 1 to the results is good. You know, you can get super smites off easier, etc., etc. Next, all of the models with the attribute have a 6+ invulnerable save. Now that might not seem like much, but it does come up. When everything has it, those 6s will come up.
Especially with Strands of Fate.
You know, if I'm firing a Dark Lance at, you know, a Falcon or a Fire Prism, and I've got a Strands of Fate automatic 6, or I just happen to roll a 6, and that Falcon was on its last wounds, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. So having the 6+ invuln for nothing, basically, is really good. And then they've got another rule on top of that. The entire army ignores mortal wounds on the roll of a 5+. So that makes you very resilient, not just against psychic powers.
Yeah.
But anything that does mortal wounds.
Stratagems,
right?
Sniper bullets.
You've got an inbuilt save that helps protect your vehicles, your wraiths, you know, whatever it is that you're running in your force. So overall, really, really powerful attributes right out of the gate. Then they've got the Warlord traits, then they've got their own relic, and then they've got their own stratagem. Same format that we've seen with all of the recent codexes as well. Warlord trait's a really, really nice one. After you make a Strands of Fate roll, if your Warlord's on the battlefield, you can choose to retain 1 additional dice, as we mentioned. So now I'm holding 5.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we've already said how powerful Strands of Fate can be. This just only adds to that. And the fact, of course, now you can take multiple Warlord traits via a stratagem, you're going to probably just auto-include that.
If you're running Ulthwe and you're not taking that, you're probably making a mistake.
Yeah. Then Relic, the Ghost Helm of Ali Shazir. This is a great relic as well. You know, 1 additional psychic power from the Runes of Fortune, Discipline, and then on top of that, and incidentally, because it's Ulthwe Psychic, you could put this on a Warlock in theory.
Yeah.
Each time a psychic test is taken for the bearer on an unmodified result of 9+, and don't forget if it's your first psychic test, you're adding 1 to the result
But
anyway.
It also says unmodified, mate.
Oh, that's a really good point, yes. That psychic power or psychic action cannot be denied.
Yeah, which we've seen a couple of times with some armies, and it's not going to happen all the time, but when it does, it's very good because you just go, this is such a strong thing that I need to get off, and there's nothing my opponent can do about it.
Well, but you could use a Strands of Fate roll to have 1 of them as a 6.
Make 1 of them as a flat 6 because it counts as an unmodified roll of that.
So yeah, there's ways to manipulate that too. And then finally, Stratagem, Discipline of the Black Guardians. You know, it's cool, thematic for Ulthwe. It's 1 CP, you add 1 to the attack roll. Guardians have had a bit of a glow up anyway, so that stacks quite well with them. So that's Ulthwe. Overall, I think you're getting a lot of rules packed in there.
You are.
A bit like Blackheart from Drakari, just also get additional rules. Definitely one of the more powerful craft worlds. There's an argument, depending on how you build it, that it is the best one.
I think it's the best one as a general purpose.
Yeah, but there are Samhain can be really good, Biltan can be really good, Iyanden can be really good. Yeah. I know you want to talk about Iyanden, don't you?
Yeah. Whilst you're flicking, I'm going to address this now because I can already hear the comments being typed in the keyboard. I don't normally play the salty Necron player, but just for reference, everyone, the Sazerac dynasty gets a 5-up shrug and reroll a wound roll.
Yeah.
They don't get a 6-up invo.
No.
So, you know.
No, they also don't get a 4th ability on top of it.
They don't get a 4th ability on top of that. So, I'm just, I'm usually not one to play the Salty Necron player, and I'm usually not one to, sort of agree with the whole Codex creep thing, but...
No, but I think we can, look, it is...
There's a lot going on in Ulthwe, let's put it that way.
We've already laid the foundations to suggest that this book is going to be more powerful than the earlier 9th edition codexes. That's because those earlier 9th edition codexes obviously need a glow up.
Yeah,
they need a glow up now.
It happens every time.
The
first codex
we can talk about in a separate video. But for now, if you're a Craftworld player, you should be real happy.
Yeah, you're really happy.
So let's talk Iyanden.
Iyanden, yes. So I've never really been an Eldar aficionado, but I have always enjoyed the aesthetic, and the Wraith models are always the one that I remember as a kid looking at in White Dwarf and being like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like the Wraith Lord model. Like
The old school Dreadnought. It's called an Elder Dreadnought back then.
Yeah, the Dreadnought, yeah. I've always loved...
Square base.
I've always loved those models. So I'm quite excited about what Iyanden is able to do now. So their Craftworld attribute is Stoic Endurance, and that means that each time you take a combat attrition test, you add 1 to it, essentially. And on top of that, and this is the big one, each time attack is allocated to a model with this attribute, if the attack has an AP characteristic of -1 or -2, you reduce it by 1. Yeah. So AP1 becomes 0, AP2 becomes AP1.
Yeah.
Which is very, very nice.
It's very powerful when you combine combine it with the fact that Wraith units, we'll talk about in the top 5 units, Wraith units will be in there, I'm sure, but just as clarification here, they do get a -1 damage.
Yeah, all your Wraith constructs get a -1
and you're still rocking toughness 6 as a base or higher, depending on what type of unit it is. So now all of a sudden I'm seeing Thick City-esque type power in built. So Iyanden are very
big time.
good.
Yeah, because AP1 and AP2 weapons are dime a dozen in the 41st millennium. For good or for ill. So having a way to mitigate that alongside other buffs that you can do is very, very nice.
It's super hard to shift.
If you think about a heavy bolter, it effectively becomes a 3-shot bolter.
For
Iyanden,
it's really on 5s. It's basically got no AP.
It's got no AP and it's damage 1. Yeah, so you may as well. Yeah, it's like, okay,
cool.
Yeah.
Moving on, the Warlord trait, Enduring Resolve, you can give a 5-up shrug to your Warlord, which is nice. They're already pretty durable. The Citronome of Iyanden is back, baby. That's right. Citronome? Citronome.
Citronome?
Whatever.
I would say Citronome.
Like a metronome, but psychic.
Potato, potato. Potato, potato?
Tomato, tomato.
So,
Lieutenant.
Yes. Oh, let's not get into that argument. Good grief. Lieutenant. I keep getting told off by people in the comments. So this has changed for better, I think, for the balance of the game. If it was the old version, but you give it to Iyanden model. In your command phase, you select one friendly Iyanden Spirit Host unit from your army. Until the start of your next command phase, you get +1 attack, and they also get battle focus.
Yeah, which is really nice.
Nice on the Wraith Guard.
Yeah, really, really nice.
Yeah,
it's very cool indeed. And their stratagem is Guided Wraith Sight. It's 1 command point. Use it in your shooting phase or your fight phase. You select a Iyanden Spirit Host model from your army and 1 Spirit Host unit. Until the end of the phase, they're considered to be in range of the Spirit Seer's Spirit Mark ability.
Yeah, which is a reroll 1 to wound, if I remember correctly.
Yes, So now that's just anywhere on the board. So if you've got a unit of Wraithblades deep striking to make a charge, using those Strands of Fate rolls, and then they go, cool, I'll have reroll 1s to wound, even though my Spirit Seer is in my backline, safe.
And it's only
sound.
1 CP.
Yeah, it's a nice little boost.
There's some ways to make these relatively slow Spirit Host units much faster. There are ways and means to deep strike them with certain abilities.
We'll cover that in the combos video.
Certain buildings type things. So yeah, they've got a really nice glow up. If you've got lots of Wraith type units, and we'll talk about the Wraith Knight a bit later on as well, because good golly, that's got better too. It's a really nice, very, very robust Craftworld. Akin maybe to Custodes, maybe.
I was literally about to say that. I think, there are some deep strike options, but you know, as we've seen with Custodians, you can run them in large blobs. A large Wraith blob, in my opinion, or two, is actually very viable now. A bit like the double Paladin bomb that I used to run in in 8th edition.
Yeah.
It's effective. They're very hard to shift.
Yeah.
You can just advance up the board, and you will get to your mid board by turn 2, depending on how you've deployed.
Yeah.
And then you can sit and spread on those objectives, and it's very, very
They're
difficult
hard
to
to
contend
move.
with.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
what are you
they're
going to
hard
do?
to
Charge me? I happen to be really good in combat.
Yep.
Yeah, a bit of a problem. So yeah, Iyanden are fantastic.
Yeah. So after them, we've got the other Craftworlds. Beltan are in the game that is available now, so go and check them out. We also have Same Han, and we have Alatok. They're fairly similar. Again, similar sort of principles as we've seen with all the codexes. You've got basically an extra Warlord. You've got an extra Warlord trait, an extra Stratagem, an extra Relic that only they can use, and an extra chapter tactic bit to your existing one with some tweaks.
And they
here
play
and
how you'd expect those armies to run.
Sam Han's really fast. Like you know, it's fall
Over
back and
spikes,
charge,
yeah.
things like that. You know, so they'll be covered in games coming out. I do want to talk about Ynnari because they are significantly changed to their previous incarnation because they are basically now a craft world.
Right.
You use them as, for all intents and purposes, you replace the Craftworld keyword with Ynnari. You can still have Drukhari and Harlequin units in the army, but there's a lot of caveats now. You have to have one Craftworld unit, one Assyriani unit, for each one that you have, and they have to be the same battlefield role.
Yeah.
So you can't have, I'll take 3 units of Kabbalite warriors or 3 units of witches and in my troops, and then some Harlequins in my fast attack, and then some Eldar heavy support. You can't do that now. If you want to take 3 units of Kabbalite warriors as your troops, you need to have 3 Guardians or Rangers in your troops as well. Yep. So it's basically, it's more of they are a craft world with a sprinkling of Drukhari and Harlequins if you want. I'd argue, I don't know if it's even a good idea to do that because especially for the characters, because you don't get access to their relics, their warlord traits, or their stratagems.
Yeah, I would actually argue they're probably better off being run with Craftworld units.
Yeah.
Just
and maybe like you might take like 1 or 2 little things here and there. Now they do, because they are technically part of the craft world, they do get the craft world ability, which is Strength from Death, which is now much better. It's always fight first, which as we know is very strong.
Hugely powerful.
And if you are, it works like Order of Our Martyred Lady. If the unit is attacking and they are below starting strength, you get +1 to hit. That's shooting and fighting. So you do get a benefit with your shooting units now. So let's say you've got a unit of 5 Dark Reapers, you lost 1 to the opponent's shooting phase, that unit of Dark Reapers now gets +1 to hit for the rest of the game. So it's very, very nice. So it works in all stages now. It's always on with the always fight first. It's a much more robust and applicable attribute. So you will give that to any Harlequins that join the army. They won't get their own little thing. You will give that to any Drukhari units that are in the army. Now here's a weird little quirk. And I expect this to be FAQ'd straight away, and I would advocate that anyone that wants to use Ynnari just play it like this. Because your Harlequins units and your Drukhari units don't have Strands of Fate, and the Strands of Fate says every model in your army must be the Assyriani keyword, which they aren't, you don't get Strands of Fate with Ynnari. That's really stupid. Don't play it like that. Because that doesn't seem right to me. So that's just really weird. There's other little sort of caveats as well. It's kind of what you would expect. You can't take the paid upgrades from those armies. You can't take relics from those armies. You can't take the same as now. You can't take runes of fate, but you get revenant discipline.
Yep. And you've got your own relics.
And you've got your own relic, you've got your own strat and relic now. They've lost a lot of the, but all of the main.
You still have access to the...
Oh yeah, you still get the main Craftworld stratagems. In addition, if you're using Incubi or Scourges, because they actually get an ability now, because in the Drukhari book they're mercenaries, so they don't get like Black Heart or anything like that. Yeah. You do have to pay more points for them. It's 4 points for Incubi, so that makes them 22 points a model, which is a lot.
It's a lot, and you know, obviously I love Incubi, but you've got such powerful aspects warrior combat units now that I'd really argue you don't need to use them unless you want to thematically use them.
And here's the really weird thing. You're paying 4 points for Incubi to get +1 to hit when they're below half strength on their weapon skill 2. And if you were Drukhari anyway, you were getting +1 to hit in turn 3. And fight first when you've got Tormentors. It's a bit of a weird one that way. Scourges only cost 2 points. That actually works quite nicely for them if you're going to run a unit of Scourges and you go, I'll take a couple of chaff, and then you go, oh no, I lost one. Oh, here come my shredders.
Shredder train, hit 'em on twos.
So, you know, there's some nice things there. You still can't take Phoenix Lords, despite the fact that Jane Zar is with the Ynnari in the fluff. You still can't run Jane Zar. I'm sure that will annoy some people out there. It annoys me because it's just marry the two together. Have the fluff and crunch be friends. You can't take the Avatar of Cain. You can't take Solitaires. You can't take Corsairs.
Yep.
All kind of expected. Your Warlord trait is Warden of Souls. This now regains you a wound in your command phase. And if you're fighting an enemy unit that is below starting strength, you get +1 attack and strength. So you can make a fairly nice beat stick character. The Relic's quite nice. The Lost Shroud, you get -1 damage.
Yep.
Which is always useful.
Yep.
And if you are attacked by something that has an unmodified damage of 1, you get +1 to your armor save.
Yep.
It's interesting that they've clarified unmodified damage characteristic of 1 there, because most of the time those things just say damage characteristic of 1.
Yeah.
It's so that it doesn't combine with the -1 damage bit.
Right.
But it's just an interesting distinction there. And then your stratagem, Inevitable Fate. So this is the thing, they've lost a lot of their unique Warlord traits and relics and stratagems, but you just get everything else now. You're a Craftworld.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's a lot simpler to use.
Hence why it's important that they do have the Strands of Fate.
Yeah,
otherwise they probably would have been gutted of quite a lot of flavour.
It's just a bit weird, yeah. So don't.
Be interesting to see what GW do with that.
Yeah, I don't think that's intended. I think that's just it's just a mistake that's happened in the editing process. But Inevitable Fate, you use when a Ynnari unit from your army is selected to shoot or fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack that targets a unit that is below half strength, you add 1 to the wound roll, which is very nice. So if you need to finish off that unit, you got a Fire Prism, +1. Yep. It's very nice, right? So they're an interesting army. They're very different now because you need predominantly Craftworld units. It does make them simpler from like a rules perspective by just saying they're a Craftworld. But I think it does remove a little bit of flavor, but there's still enough there that you can kind of make it your own. So they still work quite nicely. And the attribute, I think, is one of the better ones. Always fight first is very strong.
It's very powerful.
And the +1 to hit if you're wounded. Well, not wounded, but if your units are wounded. So not so good for vehicles, this army, but great for
and you can build, Craftworlds can be built as an absolutely phenomenal combat army if you want to. And having that rule.
Unit of Wraith Blades with that. Kill my Wraith Blade. I dare you.
It's good. It's good. It's really good. It's really
so, and then they also give you an example of a Ynnari detachment in here, much like they did with the Drukhari. I'm a bit disappointed that they've not done this with other armies, like giving you an example of how the detachment system works, which is great for new players.
Yeah, that's true,
Having said that, Ynnari and Drukhari are probably the most complicated ones in that regard because there's so many moving parts to their detachments. So I get why they've not done it for, say, Space Marines or Sisters or anything like that. But it would have been nice to see from like an accessibility point of view.
There tends to be these extra little details in the Xenos Codexes.
We've mentioned this before.
There's additional illustrations for relics and things like that.
They show you the weapons.
There's just more stuff.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
It feels like this. I think it could be because like you go, so many people play Imperium. They know what a heavy bolter looks like. They know what a melter gun looks like. But again, from an accessibility point of view, it's really good if you're a brand new Elder player. With sort of just going off a little bit on a tangent here because of course we are. You go into the weapon profiles and they show you like the aspect weapons at the back here.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's just really cool. It's just nice little bits of detail like that, which I really, really like about these new codexes. But yeah, like you say, it's a bit, some of them just kind of go, oh, there's definitely a bit of a Xenos bit here. And then others you just kind of go, no nice things for you. But yeah, Ynnari are very different, but still very cool, very viable. I would argue more viable because they have access to a greater spread of things from the core rules of the book itself.
Just before we move on, and because we won't have time to talk about all of the units in great detail, but in this particular video, is the Visarch glowed up? Is he actually any better in combat?
The Visarch's okay. The Incarn's okay. Yvrain's okay.
Incarn mechanics still the same?
Totally different. You can't heroically intervene anymore for a start. That's a big change.
That's a big change.
But they do have the same like avatar rule that the avatar. So half damage is pretty wild. 4 up in bump, but they don't get the shrug anymore. They don't give a shrug anymore. I mean, they are pretty nasty. They've got the standard like Bellacore type profile now, where they go, here's a sweep or for lots of attacks, or here's a stab with no invulns because I drain your soul. D3 plus 3 damage on a melee weapon I don't have a problem with. It's D3 plus 3 damage on ranged weapons that I have a problem with. The Yinkan is a bit of a weird one, especially for people that were kind of using the Yinkan as a toolkit and putting them into their Elder armies. You can't do that anymore. There's no rules which allow you to just put in your Vrain or put in the Vizark. Or
You've got to run a Ynnari army.
You've got to have a Ynnari army, or at least a Ynnari detachment. But again, if you're playing the chapter approved missions, because it's a craft world, you can't have a Ynnari detachment and a Bealtan detachment.
Right.
So what you can do is a Ynnari detachment and a Harlequin's traveling players detachment, which then gives you the Harlequin stratagems, which helps if you've got It gets very confusing, but there's options basically.
Okay, right. So we've spoken about Ulthwe in some good detail, Iyanden, and of course the Ynnari. That's our highlights of the Craftworld attributes. Next up, we're going to talk about some highlighted stratagems, some relics, some psychic powers. All that to look forward to coming up in a moment. Let's kick this off with some stratagems, shall we? How do you feel about that?
Feel great.
Some stratagems. Now, a lot of stratagems in the book, but then when you start going through it, you realise actually a lot of these are Harlequins. So you're getting probably about the same amount that the Craftworlds have already had.
You get your 4 pages. I would say that these stratagems are very much like Orc and Necron stratagems. They're quite specific.
Yes.
There's not a lot of, I mean, the general ones are very good. Lightning Fast is still here. It's still phenomenal. It's now 1 CP, as you would expect, given the Drukhari. You've still got things like Fire and Fade. You know, you've got things like that are really good and generally widely applicable. But you've got a couple of other ones which is like, oh, this is a really good stratagem, Sweeping Hawk only. This is a decent stratagem, Shroud Runners only. This is a good stratagem, Rangers only. So there's a lot of quite bespoke stratagems, which isn't a bad thing because your army rules are already really good and most of your units have a good number of special rules. So you're kind of doing what you would want, which is just going, I can rely on my units just to be good, rather than going, here's 18 stratagems to make them viable.
Yeah, and you're lucky in the fact that your data sheets are pretty much all really good. So the stratagems aren't as required to glow things up. You're not looking at buffing a unit with multiple stratagems. I completely agree. Having said that, they do push some units right up into overdrive. Are there any standouts for you?
Well, you mentioned earlier about manipulating battle focus. So there's 2 which allow you to do that. One of which is Outcast, so that's Rangers or Shroud Runners only. You can ignore that -3 for area terrain. But Matchless Agility, any Asuryani unit that does a battle focus move, just go 6. Which is great.
And it's only 1 CP, whereas you compare it with something like Fire and Fade. Sure, that does allow you to move 7 inches, but that is 2 CP. So this is a cheaper way to get a similar result, if that makes sense?
Although Fire and Fade, because battle focus you don't get on any vehicles apart from,
that is true.
There's a once per game upgrade that vehicles can take, and Warwalkers have
vectored engines.
Vectored engines, So there might be times where you go, I didn't have the points for vectored engines and I really need to keep that Falcon safe. You've still got like Fire and Fade to do on stuff like that. There's a couple of other there's cute ones, give Guardians reroll 1s to hit. But they've got rules which allow them to do that with a lot of their stuff anyway.
They do, which we'll talk about in
we'll
units. It's interesting. Linked fire is quite different, so it's worth talking about.
Sure,
you do have to have fire prisms within 12 inches of each other now. I actually quite like that because you can get some really junky stuff before. It is 2 CP. The big kicker though is the fact that it does ignore invulnerable saves. It's a very, very, very powerful mechanic, almost obnoxiously powerful depending on who you're playing. Like I'm sure if someone puts their shiny Mortarian down on the table and the person's got 3 fire prisms and they go first, they might not be having a great day. But it is worth going, that's a really powerful stratagem. Luckily fire prism's not too cheap. And the stratagem is 2 CP, but it's real powerful.
Because what it basically does is you need to have you pick 1 fire prism and then you must pick 1 or 2 others. So you can't do this if you don't have more than 1, if you don't have 2 or more fire prisms. So you can't just go, I ignore inbounds. And basically what the other friendly fire prisms can't use their laser. Again, as you kind of are used to, you can only use this on the big shot, so you can't use this to go, I'm ignoring invuns on my anti-infantry one.
That's right.
So that's useful.
2 shots, the big shot's 2 shots.
And it gives you their shots. So it does limit you because it means you don't have the variety of picking other targets, but if you really need to just get rid of one target.
It's like strength 14 minus 5.
It's strength 14 minus 5,
3d3.
3d3 damage.
Yeah,
you know,
it's pretty nasty.
It's a beefy weapon. Yeah. I'm a bit annoyed with that stratagem because they got rid of all those stratagems of have 3 of this or have multiple of this and have them, like, they got rid of all those stratagems and then they've left it in for fire. I get it because it's thematic, because they do that in the fluff. They, they turn the beam and they turn the nozzle and it fires into one and then it bounces around. So it is a cool stratagem. It's just a bit odd from like a design perspective when they've already gotten rid of them for others. But oh well. Forewarned is basically the same. Phantasm's basically the same. Fire and Fade. You've got your webway strike, your deep strike stuff. Like
Feigned Retreat, which is Cruel Deception now.
Cruel Deception in the Drakari. So you've got a fall back and shoot or charge, or for 2 CP you do both. So
that's nice.
Really, really good.
Really powerful, actually.
Yeah, really, really powerful to have access to. And the shield discharge does tie in with the Wave Serpent change.
Yeah, which is very different now, actually.
Yeah, so we can, I mean, the shield discharge, same as like before it turned, your shield is turned off, but now rather than doing it as a rule to do mortal wounds, it's now a stratagem. It doesn't do mortal wounds, but it supports your charges. So you go, nothing can overwatch this unit. You've got to be within 12 now. So it's pretty significantly different. But again, that's kind of what I mean. Is like you've got a lot of stuff like that where it's only really applicable to Wave Serpents or the Guardians with the Serpent Scale platform, the Storm Guardians.
It's nice to know the army doesn't need the stratagems.
Exactly, and it doesn't need them. It really doesn't need them.
What's quite cool is that if someone's getting into the hobby or getting into Eldar for the first time, you don't have to worry about having to remember all the strats because your units are already really good. So in a way, although they are quite complex, it can kind of lean towards being more of a beginner's army.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, realistically, you're going to use probably Matchless Agility, Lightning Fast Reactions, Feigned Retreat, and Fire and Fade in every game. Yeah. And then you might take 1 or 2 more. Yeah,
Phantasm is still extremely powerful.
Redeploy
does what it did before. But yeah, sometimes you won't need to use it.
Yeah, so there's, I think for the most part, Eldar players are going to be quite happy with the fact that your stratagems aren't that amazing outside of sort of those niche cases or those specific units that can use them, because it's just less to remember and use. So you're definitely happy about using
I like
that.
Yeah, the game has gotten so big that it's definitely very big that you just want. Sometimes you just want it to just be a little bit more streamlined, so you can just make decisions quickly, and you don't have to look through 50 pages to find what it is that you need to do. So that's the stratagems.
Yes.
Okay. Exarch powers are still in, although slightly different. They also include some statistic upgrades now. We won't go over all of them, but let's talk the stat upgrades. So they're pointed upgrades. Obviously, Crimson Hunters, you can upgrade one to be an Exarch.
You don't have Crimson Hunter Exarch as a data sheet anymore.
No, it's an actual upgrade, and that makes sense to me. So what you do is, if the unit has an Exarch power, its Exarch model will also gain the bonuses to its characteristics as follows: add 1 to the wounds characteristic. Makes sense.
Great.
If that model is a Crimson Hunter, Dark Reaper, Swooping Hawk, or Fire Dragon Exarch, you improve the ballistic skill by 1.
Which is wild.
If it's anything else, you improve the attack. So it makes sense. If you're a shooty person, you get a better to hit roll. If you're a fighty person, you get more attacks.
Yeah, and that alone is usually worth the points.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a nice boost, and some of them are very good.
Yeah, you're looking in a points range generally of +10 to +20 points for these powers, depending on how powerful they are. The most expensive one is 25 points, actually.
30.
Is it 30?
Yeah,
is it? Oh, that's for the Crimson Hunter.
There's a Crimson Hunter, which is
Ides of Cain.
So just because if you make an attack against a fly unit, you just hit.
You just hit automatically.
Sure. Okay. I mean, you're already getting like bonuses against fly units anyway, so fine.
It should be pointed out, because I missed it on the first read, that you could only have 1 power of each.
Yeah, so you can't take Eyes of Cain on 2 Crimson Hunters,
Yeah,
for
so I'd
example.
have to, if I had 2 Crimson Hunters, I'd have to take Strafing Assault on 1 and Eyes of Cain on 1,
Yeah,
or whatever.
And then some of them, so you only get 3 for each Exarch now rather than a choice of 6. And as you mentioned, they cost points now rather than a CP or replacing an existing power. Most of them are really good though. There's actually quite a good range of choices here. Some of them you kind of go, meh, don't really mind.
Yeah, a lot of them are just a slight glow up for the Exarch itself. I always tend to look for ones which affect the whole unit.
The ones which affect the units
you get
are
more
very
value.
nice.
Like Reaper's Reach. I mean, I do use this in the battle report, but it's worth mentioning because it is a highlighted one. That will allow the Dark Reapers to ignore the movement penalty. For firing with a heavy weapon. That, of course, is a really,
which is very nice
to have.
You know, there's things like your Howling Banshees, the Exarch one can give them a 4-up in melee. You know, so things like that is they're nice boosts that you can get for either the Exarch to make them even better or for the units themselves. So yeah, they're nice bonuses.
So that's the Exarch powers. There's 2 more things to talk about. We're going to go to a brief overview of some of the psychic powers. And before that, though, I think that we should talk about secondaries, because secondaries are pretty critical in 9th edition. We won't go over all of them, but basically you've got a Warpcraft, a No Mercy, No Respite, Battlefield Supremacy, and Shadow Operations one. Quite interesting, the Battlefield Supremacy one, which synergizes with using the Webway Gate piece of terrain, which has got its own things that we can talk about in perhaps a combinations video. Warpcraft, Scry Futures, it's a bit Grey Knights secondary.
It's the Thousand Suns one.
Yes, the Thousand Suns
it's
one.
Mutate Landscape.
You do need to do each objective, and you need to be within range of it, within 3 inches, but it is netting you 3 points. The warp charge does go up from 4 to 5 to 6, etc., etc. But it is actually a good secondary, depending on who you're playing, what you're doing. Do you have any thoughts on the others?
Yeah, so Wrath of Cain, if you build around it, can be extremely high scoring. So it only works for your Aspect Warriors, but basically if you kill an enemy unit in melee with an Aspect Warrior, at the end of it, so this is an end of the battle round one. If you've killed an enemy unit in melee, you get a victory point with an Aspect Warrior. If you've killed an enemy unit via shooting with a different Aspect Warrior, it specifically says different, you get another victory point. Here's the kicker. You score 2 additional victory points at the end of the battle round if 1 or more enemy units were destroyed by a melee attack made by an Aspect Warrior unit from your army, and 1 or more enemy units were destroyed by a ranged attack made by a different Aspect Warrior from your army with this battle round. You've already done that, so you just get 4 victory points. So if you build your army around the Aspect Warriors, you can get 4 victory points a battle round by killing 2 units, which is incredibly good returns. But you have to build around it because it's Aspect Warriors.
So you want your Dark Reapers.
Aspect Warriors are cool.
Scorpions,
and obviously, you know, if you go like, oh, I killed that one guy with my Shuriken pistol and then I charged another unit, no, it's the same unit. So if you build with that one in mind, it's very good, but it could potentially score you very low. So, Relics, you've only got 2 pages.
Relics, there's only 2 pages, and to be honest, they're pretty similar to what the existing Relics were before.
They're fine. There's nothing here that's like, that is an auto take.
It's not like the Praetorian Plate or the Onaga Gauntlet.
The Weeping Stones is the one which gives you, you can roll an additional D6 on that Strands of Fate roll. So that's obviously a really powerful one.
Lots of
Phoenix Gem's been clarified to, because it was a bit of a mess before.
It was, It doesn't explode anymore, but you just stand up on a 2+. You're mini Celestine at the end of a battle round.
Got your Fire Saber, Shard of Ynnari.
They're okay. They're okay.
Nothing
special
to write home about. Okay.
You do have Exarch relics though.
Yes.
That is true, actually.
Which is interesting. This is kind of a cool new mechanic. It's similar to giving a Space Marine Sergeant a relic, but they have their own set relics, and you can have 2 of these instead of 1 normal relic. And these are actually quite good. Kane's Lance is particularly nice on the Shining Spears. So when you finish a charge move, you pick 1 enemy unit in engagement range on a 4+. So it is a 50-50, but on a 4+, they take D3 mortal wounds and they have fight last.
Yeah, which is
nice. You know, if none of the other relics are kind of speaking to you, you can kind of just go, I'll take 2. There's 1 for each of the for the Exarchs. So and there's a couple of really quite nice ones in here. So it's a nice alternative to have.
Yeah, absolutely. You've then got your Warlord traits, and then you've got your psychic powers. So Warlord traits again. Pretty similar, if not identical, to what the previous Warlord traits were.
I think they've received some pretty big, they've either been fine-tuned or they operate in a very similar way, but just zhuzhed up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Walker in many paths. Once per turn, you can reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, or 1 damage roll for the Warlords. Seer of the Shifting Vector is rolling a d6 for stratagem. Each command point spent for both you and your opponents, and you get the command point.
It's the old path of command, I think.
Exactly, yeah, because the Autarchs don't have that inbuilt bonus.
We'll get
anymore.
to Autarchs.
No, they got their own thing, which is arguably much better. Fate's Messenger's good. Reduce the damage characteristic to 0. For once per turn for a save that
That's
you fail.
an interesting one as well, because it says when a saving throw is failed, it's not like the first, so you can pick that. Because some of the other ways that you can get around things like that is, I'll shoot with bolt guns. You failed one, it's a 0. You just go, I'll wait for the las cannon.
But no, you can't give that to the Avatar because you can't have a Warlord trait.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, it is. That's
I just go, you finally got that Dark Lance
Lol,
no. So look, right, they've got Runes of Battle, Runes of Fortune, and Runes of Fate. So the 3 disciplines that we've had previously, one of course were introduced via a Psychic Awakening supplement, which they've kept in, has some interesting ones. It is much better. I'd still argue that Fortune is, or rather Fate and Battle are going to be the ones which you see a lot of, but there's definitely places for some of the Fortune powers too. So Chef, why don't you kick us off? Let's go Runes of Battle.
So Runes of Battle, again, it's all very similar to what you'd expect. It works basically the same way. You've got 2 parts of it, a debuff or a buff. You decide what you do when you've casted it. When you've casted it, is that a word?
When you've cast it.
When you've cast it. Most of them are pretty much identical, like 18-inch range. It's either +1 to hit for you or -1 to hit for your enemy in melee, stuff like that. The big changes here, there's 2 big changes to this because most of them are the same. Protect and Jinx now doesn't affect your invulns. It's only your armor saves, and that's for both aspects of it, so it's not quite as powerful, but it's still very good. And Quicken...
Warp Charge 7, by the way.
Oh, Warp Charge 7. Did it used to be 6?
No, it was always 7.
Oh, was it always 7? Yeah. Anything that modifies your saves or invuns should be a high Warp Charge. Looking at you, Null Zone. Quicken is very different now because you cannot charge.
No, so you can't double move and then charge.
No double move and charge. But it is still an 18-inch range. So it's still pretty big. As you would expect with a lot of these powers as well, they're like core or character only. So you can't give +1 to saving throws for like your Wall Walkers, for example. You can.
So you're not getting that army-wide effect anymore.
You can do it on your Wraith Blades.
Yes.
And Restrain is very nice. Half your movement, this is for the enemy, so you half the enemy movement, and they can't do actions, which is very nice. And if they're doing an action, it immediately fails, which in an era of the mission secondaries and a lot of them having actions can be very powerful indeed. But otherwise, the Runes of Battle are fairly similar. Runes of Fate have changed not much in terms of their overall utility.
But the range is the big change.
The range is the big change here, and that is a nice rhyme. Well done, you. Again, they are affecting core or characters only. You are not getting Doom on units of War Walkers. You are not getting Guide on a Fire Prism. So take that into consideration. In addition, all of your base ranges are now 18 inches.
So Doom's no longer 24 base. Guide's no longer 24 base. You still don't need line of sight, which is something important to mention. But
unless you roll a 10 or more on your psychic test, and that is a modified 10 or more. So there are ways that you can manipulate that. Then it becomes 24 inches. It's a weird mechanic. I'd have rather they'd have just not bothered with that bit and just left it at 18 inches. And I would have preferred it if their things needed to be visible, because every other ability in the game needs to be visible. So
I wonder if it was with the introduction of Strands of Fate. I wonder if that's why they've added it in, just to have like more of a use for those.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, casting Doom basically automatically is a pretty good use of the Strands of Fate roll as well.
True.
So it's one of those. It's one of those things where you kind of go, well, they were already 24. They've been reduced down to 18, but you can still get 24 if you roll high. So it's not going to come up all the time. It's not something you can realistically plan for. It's just kind of there to me. But the powers are still great. Guide now works in melee, you pointed out.
Yes, which is really nice.
Which is nice.
Which is really, really nice. So we really hit rolls there. And because you've got a lot, and then this is what I'm going to lead on to next. Fortune, still your 5-up ignore wounds. But with the massive glow up, things like Wraith units have got, when you whack that on a unit of Wraiths, and so I'm talking about these big blobs, you've now got a major problem on your hands for your opponent, not for you. And you know, of course, you'll buff them with the armor save, with protect. It starts to become a major, major threat that just can't be shifted. Executioner, still as cool as it was before. The extra D3 mortal wounds if you remove a model. Mind
you
War.
can select Executioner now.
Yes.
Yeah. Did it because it used to be the nearest, if I remember right.
No, I think Executioner you always. Oh, I can't remember now.
I thought it was the nearest.
Yeah, you might be right about that.
So you can select that now, but you can't pick characters with wounds. You've got to follow Lookout Sir rules, basically. You can't pick characters with a wounds characteristic of 9 or less. Mind War's kind of the same. Will of Easterand's pretty good now. It's very different now.
Gain objectives secured, massive.
Objectives secured, auto pass morale, and you can shoot and still do an action without the action failing for 1 unit within the range. So yeah, that's a nice little glow up there. Runes of Fortune now don't replace Smite. They are its own separate entity. So you have to go Runes of Fortune or Runes of Fate or Runes of Battle. You can't pick and choose.
Although I think the Farseer does allow you to pick between 2, if I remember correctly.
Maybe,
I think it does.
It might be one of those and/or things, much like Thousand Suns, where
exactly,
you mix and match. Yeah, maybe.
Runes of Fortune for me, look, you've got a few Witchfire powers. They're kind of cute, nothing to shout home about. But what is really powerful is it Impair Senses and Ghost Walk. So Ghost Walk is adding that 2 to your charge roll, which is obviously massive.
12-inch range now. It used to be 6, if I remember rightly.
I mean, you know, again, if you're deep striking your big combat unit, and you know, maybe you only got you got 1 6 to add to your charge roll.
It's an auto pass.
And then I just go right, psychic power. There we go. Thank you very much.
Impair Senses is wild.
Impair Senses is big time.
It's wild.
Oh my goodness. 18-inch range, warp charge value of 6.
Why?
If manifested, select one enemy unit until the start of your next psychic phase. That enemy unit cannot be affected by the aura abilities of units from your opponent's army. So if you've got some big Death Star unit which is being affected by this aura and this aura and this aura, you go, you are impaired.
Or very simply, if you've got OBSEC.
Rights of War.
Good grief.
Reroll 1s to hit and wound from like your Servo Skull and your Skitari. +1 to wound from Drazar.
That is killer for Admech.
It's a savage one. So effectively, the psychic phase is as important and as powerful, really,
as it should be.
As it was before. There are going to be people which will go, oh, well, Protect Jinx didn't do what it does, and the range sucks, you know, like it's only 18, it should be 24. With good manoeuvring and arguably...
Also smaller board sizes.
Yeah, smaller board sizes, and arguably your Psykers were still probably going to be on the Skyrunner jet bikes. Range is not an issue. It just isn't. So, you know, very, very powerful stuff. That concludes this part of Faction Focus. Let's talk about statistic changes. Some interesting ones there. It's coming up next. It's time to talk statistics and some of the profiles that have been remained the same for several editions now have actually changed. It's actually not that many, but we're going to talk about the ones, significant changes that have happened right now. Why don't we kick off with the mainstay of every army that Eldar generally have, Guardians, especially given the fact that Dire Avengers have been removed from the troop slot.
I'm just going to... Actually... The mainstay of every Eldar army should be the Aspect Warriors, because the Guardians are the militia as citizenry. Why are they troops? Honestly, it's just so silly. No, you're gonna have Guardians. Whether you want to or not. The beauty of 40k is you can build your army around not having troops if you so wish. But we've seen the stat changes on Warcom. That's kind of it. They've got an extra save, which is nice, puts them in line with Kabalite Warriors, and the Shuriken Catapults are just better. Extra 6-inch range. That helps them, that keeps them further away, which is really nice.
-1 AP base.
Built in -1, very tasty.
Shuriken Cannons, damage 2.
It's a slight increase, but good golly, across the whole army, Shuriken is tasty.
Still on 6s, you're getting the additional 2 AP.
Yeah, so because
it becomes AP3.
previously it made them AP3, now it's add 2 AP. So if you've got weapons, because there are some shuriken weapons that have higher base AP than 1 or 2, all of a sudden you go, oh, AP 5 or 6, okay, now you're talking my language. Why not, right? But that's kind of it.
They haven't upgraded the attacks characteristic of the Guardians, but with the Storm Guardians, their blade does give them an extra attack, so then they become the same profile effectively as a Kabalite warrior. Look, they're better than they were.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. They're better than they were. They are also a little bit more expensive than they were.
They are
by a point, as I recall, but we can talk about that in the points in a moment. Next, really interesting profile change is all of the aspect warriors now have an invulnerable save.
Yep, the aspect
5+.
armor. It is master crafted from before the fall.
Yep.
So yeah, they've gotten an armor save that is usable now because there's AP everywhere. So now they get to save,
which is cool.
Which is nice to have. And most of the aspect warriors have also gained an extra attack to represent the fact that they are veterans.
That's right.
Which is cool.
Whether they on striking scorpions.
Yeah.
Good.
Scorpions are good. They're very nice.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. Again, that sort of brings me to the Ynnari argument. You don't really need the incubi when you've got things like scorpions in the book. Run them if you want to, because they're cool, but you probably don't need to pay those extra points, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. Because this is the weird thing, like, there's still elves, or space elves across the board, they're a bit quicker than your human profile, but they're still strength 3, toughness 3, 1 wound. Their save is only generally hovering around the 4 mark. Some of them wear heavier armor. Leadership is kind of 8, maybe 9 at a push for certain units, 7 for others. But so their overall stats haven't actually changed all that much.
No.
Their weapons have gotten better.
Yes.
And they've gotten basically tons more special rules. So they previewed Banshee at time of filming. They previewed Banshees a few days before we filmed this. They've got like 6 special rules now, and you see them all being used in the game over here on Freeview, so you can go check that out. Scorpions have discounting the aspect armor, because I consider that as part of the stats, because it's a save. They've gotten 1, 2, 3 special rules as a result of their war gear and their upgrades, whereas before they had maybe 2.
And because their attacks is now base 3, and their Scorpion Chainsword still gives them an additional attack. It's actually 4 attacks each. Their strength has gone down to 3, because I think they used to be strength 4, but their Scorpion Chainsword gives them +2 strength, so it ends up
it's a wash.
-1 AP. They kick out a lot of attacks. Mandy Blasters are wild. But we can talk.
There's lots of there's a few stat changes. So like another big stat change we've mentioned with the Wraiths. Basically, all of your Wraith constructs, including Hemlocks, get -1 damage, which is very powerful, as we know. And your Wraith Blades now, they always get the +1 attack rather than +1 attack when charging. They just get it built in. That's
they're just better.
Yeah, they're just better all the time, which is nice.
Their Ghost Axe no longer has the -1 to hit.
-1 to hit.
That's nice.
It's flat 2 damage. Like it's little. It's kind of the tweaks that you expect at the moment. Like a lot of the D3 becomes damage 2. A lot of the -1s that don't make much sense have been removed.
Reliable glow-ups.
It's all reliability glow-ups.
And then, of course, the biggest stat change is a Bright Lance going from D6 to Mirror the Dark Lance. It's D3 +3.
It's D3.
It's savagely powerful.
Yeah, because it's very spammable.
And it is very spammable in this book. It's actually, ironically, more spammable than with Drukhari. You have greater access to that technology in this book because of things like War Walkers,
Wraith Lords.
etc.
Wraith Lords, just your bog standard Guardian platforms.
They're just everywhere.
So yeah, I mean, again, it's nothing that should be unexpected. However, given the direction that the codexes have been going, there's a lot of reliability. Your tanks are all pretty much the same: toughness 7, 12 wounds. Wraith Knights now have a built-in 5-up, which is nice.
Yeah, that's really nice.
So yeah, there's not actually a huge amount of stat changes. It mostly revolves around just the reliability boost from the rest of their stuff.
So with that in mind, why don't we just finish this off with the points? Because really, an army can have all of the best rules in the world, but if it's really expensive in the points or it's really undercosted, that's ultimately what's going to determine whether this book is really vicious or just okay. Let's find out. It's coming up next. The points. I'm just going to go with an initial overview of my thoughts on it. I think it's aggressively pointed. And by that, I mean, it's competitively pointed.
They teeter.
It's not undercosted everywhere like Drukhari was perhaps when it first came out. Well, not perhaps, it was. Certain large portions of it were anyway.
No, you can be honest. They were.
Yeah, but it's now on a par, I would say, points-wise, with the Drukhari. Now, there are going to be arguments that the Drukhari in some aspects are still undercosted, and I hear you if that's the case. Bear in mind though, with the recent nerfs to things like Thick City, etc., we're now, and the recent releases of the Custodies and still how strong Admech are, there's an argument that they are now sort of starting to play in the same field.
Yeah.
That doesn't help the older codexes at all, I know, but this book is definitely pointed on the same level as those, i.e. I'm saying that this is a top tier competitive book.
It is, 100%. You will see Eldar everywhere.
Yep.
They are back.
They are back in a
vengeance.
massive way, so be silent, Victor.
Yes.
You know what you did.
And there's lots of different ways to play them competitively.
They are
It's not one build.
very, very spread out in terms of their usability. Like, I think pretty much everything in this book is usable, barring maybe the Corsairs, which is a shame because the models are amazing.
It's a real shame. We're going to talk about them separately.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the characters are kind of,
Yeah.
But again, it's something that we're seeing across a lot of books now.
Yeah.
Main characters are fine.
Yeah.
well, ironically,
Other than Trajan Valoris.
yeah,
is like
ironically,
auto take.
no, Trajan Valoris is he's way overcosted and he's terrible, and no one will ever use him.
Yeah, I don't
really.
think so.
Look, points-wise, you have seen points increases from your various previous incarnations. Like Guardian Defenders have, they've gone up 1 point.
Yeah.
But for that 1 point, you have gotten battle focus, a 4-up save, 6 inches of extra range, and an extra AP base.
And inbuilt reroll ones if you're next to an objective to hit.
I'd argue that's worth more than 1 point.
It is, yeah.
So it's things like
Much better than
Howling Banshees are 18 points, but they have like 6 special rules.
They're insane. They're so good.
They're very good.
Yeah.
Your Wraith Blades have gone up to 40 points or 45 points if you use the Ghost Saxon Force Shield. But 45 points for a Toughness 6 model with -1 damage and a 4-up invulnerable, 3 wounds, and 3 attacks at Strength 7 -3 damage 2 is pretty well costed in terms of competitiveness.
Before the multiple buffs that you can give.
Yeah, and if you balance that compared to a Custodian Guard,
Yeah.
it's a toss-up between which one's best.
There's a few things in here where I look at it and I go, well, I'm glad you weren't cheaper than you are, but you still are probably verging on undercosted. The Falcon is ludicrous. The Falcon is stupid.
He's a very, very, very powerful gunboat with a transport capacity that can deep strike turn 1.
It's a drop pod.
That's the thing for
We're
me.
going to talk about him more in the units.
It's a drop pod with 3 bright lances.
We're going to talk about him in the units because obviously he's probably going to make the top 5 units. But he's really good, and the Pulse Laser is basically a double bright lance now.
It trades
a slight less AP.
It trades a point of AP for a point of strength, so it's comparable.
Yeah.
I think some of them are actually pretty much spot on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tough one. It's like Wind Riders, you could argue, are, I don't want to say undercosted, when you give them things like the Shuriken Cannon, because the Shuriken Cannon's had such a powerful glow up with the damage too.
It's 30 points for a Shuriken Cannon.
And the inbuilt -1, it is 30 points, but it's the issue is that you can spam it, and and it's a unit of up to 9, which incidentally they removed on Shining Spears, which is now a unit of only up to 6.
Yeah.
So my counter argument would be, well, shouldn't you have done that with the Wind Riders too? So
Yeah.
I can't spam 9 Shuriken Cannons and put Blade Storm on it and various other buffs because they're a Guardian unit, etc., etc. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, that's going to be a really nasty unit. It is still 30 points per model, but it's just I can make it so nasty.
Yeah, you can run so many,
and I can do the jump shoot jump with them.
They can't do the advance. Yeah, they can't do the advance of the battle focus to get into range because it's a heavy weapon.
Yeah.
But battle focus can be used with heavy weapons, so you just go, I zip out, I shoot, I zip back,
and I can still fire and fade.
Yeah, and you're going to use that CP on the matchless agility to just go 6, 6, 6, 6. So that's.
It's a click, click, boom unit. I see you die.
There's a couple of things. Like, there's a couple of things where I just go, I mean, Storm Guardians at 8 points. I go, yeah, right, like, fine, that's cool. Range is at 13 points. I think fairly well costed. And then it's things like Howling Banshees at 18 points a model. You know what? Even with all their rules, and they're very nasty in combat, they work like Incubi. They're going to hit, they're going to blend whatever they touch, and then they die. Because they are toughness free with a 4-up save. Like, they will get gunned down by Boltfire. So they feel about right in some aspects of it.
Shroud Runners, the new unit, we should talk about them. They do kick out a lot of firepower.
They've got Scout Laser.
For relatively cheap. I mean, because they are actually 3 wounds a pop.
Yeah, because it's 2 riders.
So they're 35 points base. Is it 35 points base?
Yeah, they're 35.
Yeah. Quite interesting. There is definitely competitive. They're definitely a utility unit.
Another 3 to 6.
Yeah, they're a 3 to 6.
Yeah.
So again, it's that
Wind
sort
Riders
of why are the Wind Riders 3 to 9? I guess because they're supposed to be their guardians, so they're more.
Yeah. Well, basically, the mistake is that the sprue should never have had a shuriken cannon in each one. It should have been 1 heavy weapon per 3.
Yes.
I'm gonna die on that hill. You know,
No,
take me
I
out
agree.
of my shield. I just, there's no reason for the whole unit to have heavy weapons.
But
it's always going to be hard to balance something like that. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with them is like I say, there's a lot of variety and viability across the units. Like, everything feels like it can be used without you sacrificing something for, I'm going to take this because it's cool and flavorful. It's still going to be quite effective on the battlefield.
Big time.
Even your Wraith Knight's usable now.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, it's cool. You'll be pleased with the Wave Serpent. It's still quite expensive. And it doesn't have -1 damage anymore.
You're looking once after
I mean, it's still
upgrades.
pretty infuriating because the permanent transhuman and a 5-up
Yeah,
against
because that's what the
ranges.
Serpent Shield does now. I would still say it's a really,
Oh,
really
it's
good
very good.
tank.
It's still one of the best transports in the game, but I think
I'd expect to see it if you're.
Yeah.
I expect to see usually 1 or 2.
But I mean,
have
he's
to, but-
he's going to be running you at least 150 to 180 points.
Realistically,
it's
it's going to be 171 to 180,
Yeah.
depending on your weapon loadouts. I.e. whether you want to upgrade to Shuriken Cannon or not.
Yeah.
You're probably going to take things like Spirit Stones for double your, to count as double your wounds. But I mean, again, you don't even have to do that. It's if you want the reliability of the double Bright Lance up top.
Overall, I would say you have gotten more expensive than your previous incarnation, but you've gotten, I think, more than your value's worth for that.
Yeah.
Would I want to see 10-point Guardian Defenders? Oh, I don't know. That's getting into this is the problem with the point system at the moment, is because it doesn't feel very granular. It doesn't feel granular enough.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you go, the difference between 9 points and 10 points is, on paper, that's not so much. But if you're running 30 Guardians, all of a sudden it's 30 points. Yeah. You go, okay, well, we'll increase all the Wraith Guard up by 5 points. But if you were running 10 of them, you're now 50 points. Yeah. So it's all of a sudden, it can stack up really quickly. So points you've got to be really careful with. I think to begin with, I agree with what you say. They feel like Drakari now rather than day one Drakari or day one Admech.
The only counter to that is that, strangely, Eldar are in a way more spammable with some of their more heavy firepower than Drakari. They just have a greater range of units to do it on. It's just one of those things. How will that wash out in the meta? We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. Again, there's multiple ways to play this army. But I think on that note, we can probably close the video and say that, look, I mean, my opinion, it's a top tier book. It's a top tier book.
It's definitely
I
up there.
expect it to compete competitively.
Yep. It's going to cause a lot of headaches. It's definitely on the power level scale. I think it's definitely comparable with Drakari, with Custodes, with Tau, with like your other big horrible nasties like your Crusher Stampede. All these top tier from a competitive standpoint, it's definitely up there. From a more casual and narrative standpoint, it feels like an Eldar book.
No, it's a fantastic book. Just like when we said Drakari first came out, it's a fantastic book. Why? Because if you're a Drakari player, you can play it so many ways, and there are very few poor units that you're just never going to take.
You'd have to go out of your way to make a bad army list. That has both pros and cons, because one, it means that everything is usable, and that's really great, because if they're your army and you really enjoy them, you're going to have a great time. Where I think it will flat, and this isn't the problem with the Elder book, this is the problem with the older books. Old armies are going to have a bad time against this. They are going to have a bad time against this, but that, unfortunately, is nothing new.
No, the old armies need, unfortunately, big
big revamps.
Helping hands, yeah.
They pick them up. But if you're an Eldar player, you're definitely going to have a good time. And it's nice that your patience has been rewarded.
Yes,
because
finally,
they,
yeah.
like I say, they feel like Eldar should play. The aspect warriors are impactful. Yeah. They feel, they feel manipulative of and making sure that they are doing the right thing at the right time. The Strands of Fate is a really cool mechanic. I know we've mentioned it's maybe a bit much, but the flavour of it's fantastic.
Yeah. All the Craftworlds are well represented as well. Yeah. I think anyone that has an existing Eldar army in a particular Craftworld, all of that feel that you've got is there in this new book as well.
If you've built a Sam Han army around like Wild Riders and stuff, like they feel like they should, they can,
and they will play that way.
And they'll play that way. So there's lots of cool things, and it feels very, very thematic, which is what I like to see from a codex. Yeah, so yeah, I'm happy with that. But time will tell in terms of what may happen in terms of rules balancing. But we do live in an era where the balance data sheets do come out every 3 months. We do get points changes on the regular. Yep. For good or for ill, and FAQ. We're still going to be waiting on FAQs. Day 1 FAQs or day 57 FAQs, as the case may be, for the new codexes at time of filming. So who knows what may change in the future.
But on that note, that's all from us for this video. If you want to go and check out our top 5 units where we talk about them in detail, go over to our website, sign up for On Demand. It helps support us to make these videos for you guys here on YouTube. And of course, you can check out the Tactica article for free, also over on our website.
Please, so many sleepless nights.
For now, I've been Lawrence, he's been Chef, he's been Beard, and we'll be back very soon in another video. Bye-bye for now.
Bye!
All right, ready? Broad.
We're rolling, baby.
Check.
La 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 la.
Because since you know the points off by heart, because you're weird that way.
It's true, I am.
Hiya!